That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Challengers, the 8th narrative feature directed by Luca Guadagnino, which Amazon MGM Studios is releasing April 26th, 2024. Notably, it was supposed to open the 2023 Venice Film Festival, but was not able to do so because of the ongoing writers and actors strike at that time.
This director,
Luca Guadagnino.
do I know one of their films?
Well, we reviewed his last film, Bones and All.
Okay.
But he's also very well known for Call Me By Your Name. He's worked with Tilda Swinton quite a few times, going back to 1999. But I Am Love is an excellent film. They also did A Bigger Splash, and which is a remake of La Piscine, and Suspiria, also a remake.
This movie, Tashi, a former tennis prodigy turned coach, is married to a champion on a losing streak. Her strategy for her husband's redemption takes a surprising turn when he must face off against his former best friend and Tashi's former boyfriend. What's your pull quote?
Zendaya eats as a cold, calculating, corroding catalyst in Guadagnino's captivating tennis drama, which finds a thwarted throuple discovering more than just the love of the game.
Mine, Challengers is an alluring tale with an indulgent, overdrawn conclusion. I did enjoy this movie.
I think I liked it much more than you, and I could see people thinking that about the denouement, but I really liked it. And I was surprised. I really had no interest in seeing it.
The plot's kind of complicated, and it's told all out of sequence. We jump back and forth in time like 100 times, but I guess the story is about Zendaya plays a woman named Tashi, and modern day is 2019. And we see that in modern day, she's married to a guy named Art, and Art, who's played by
Mike Faist, who you know from Spielberg's West Side Story rehash.
Oh. Art is like a famous tennis pro, and they live a rich, lovely life. Tashi, Zendaya's character, was an up-and-coming like tennis prodigy, but in college at Stanford she injured her knee pretty badly, so she had to stop playing. So she basically coaches her husband, and they're like a dynamic duo. We see them doing like major campaigns for Aston Martin. So clearly she's made a name for herself with her husband.
They are a power couple in that world.
So in 2019 we see that he's on this losing streak, and she's like, we don't even need to, there's no point even continuing if you're going to play like shit. So what are we going to do? And she decides to have him do what are called challenger games, which I guess are like lower level games. Someone at his level should not be playing these. But her plan is that if he plays lesser people, that might boost his confidence.
Yeah, get a few wins in. Yeah.
And when he shows up to this challenger game, there's a guy named Patrick there, played by
Josh O'Connor.
And they're playing, and then all of a sudden we flash back 13 years to 2006, and we realize that these two have a history. They were best of friends. They went to boarding school together, and they played tennis together like in couples. And they both get an opportunity to meet Tashi back then in 2006, and they're both like really into her. And they get to know each other, the three of them. And Art ends up going to Stanford with Tashi, like coincidentally. But Patrick ends up dating Tashi. But we see that Art was being manipulative, trying to break them up maybe, and it worked. So Art ended up marrying Tashi, of course. But the final like 30 minutes of the film is really this 2019 match where Tashi has told her husband, if you don't win, I'm going to leave you. So the stakes are very high. And there's a lot that happens that we can get into.
Yes, it opens with that 2019 game and of course ends with that. But along the way, we learn all of this information from all of these instances over the past 13 years that heighten the tension for some.
Yeah, that's what I said. We go back and forth 100 times, like a tennis match. So in the end, it's not really, they really drag it out to the very end. And then there's a final, because they're like tied, Patrick and Art. And of course, Art is really wanting to win because he thinks his wife's going to leave him. But Tashi had sex with Patrick, like an affair, to basically convince him to throw the game. And we can get into the final game, but the way it plays out is that Art, like, he kind of throws it. Who actually won?
I would say Arts had won at the end, but it's the physicality of what happens. I think is what feels most important, and then also Tashi's reaction would suggest that this outcome it's a win-win for her because she's the master They're all three manipulative, and she's kind of, to me, the master manipulator. But yeah.
Well, the plot to me is a little confusing. So let's start with that, the manipulation. So when Tashi first meets the two guys, they're both really into her, and she can tell. So they meet her by going to a party at her house. Mm-hmm. And Patrick is much more aggressive. He's like the bad boy.
He's more experienced. He's more confident.
And he invites Tashi to their like shitty hotel to hang out, like for the after party. Mm-hmm. And of course, they don't think she's going to show up, but she does. And she's playing a little game because she kind of senses that maybe
there's some tension between the two of them,
like some sexual tension. Mm-hmm. And I think the best scene in the film is when she goes to this hotel room and she's trying to figure out, like, are you two a thing? And they're like, no, of course not. But then Patrick says, well, there was that one time. And she's like, well, you got to tell me what the story was. And they tell a story about how, like, when they were younger, Patrick introduced Art to masturbation. So I thought that was a really fun scene. And then she's playing really coy, but clearly manipulative. Mm-hmm. And she gets them to sort of, like, be intimate together. Like, they're just all making out together to the point where she gets the two guys to make out while she watches.
Where she's not needed anymore for them to continue, which is kind of an interesting way to also read the end of the final scene of the film too.
Yeah. So, and then she ends up just getting up and walking away. And she tells them, because they still don't have her phone number. And she says, how about this? In tomorrow's match that you two play, this is back in 2006, whoever wins the match tomorrow gets my phone number. And then we find out that Patrick is the one who got her number. So that's the beginning of their sort of like toxic ass friendship / relationship. And then we see that Art, who's he seems very passive.
He kind of needs to be held by the hand a little bit, and his fatal flaw, I think, is burying his head in the sand, both with how he might feel about Patrick in ways that he's not able or to articulate or experience, and then also in how Tashi ultimately treats him. He kind of ignores that too.
Because Art and Tashi go to Stanford together, but it seems like they're not super close at school because one day he invites her to lunch, and that seems like an unusual thing that they would eat lunch together. And he's like, well, I'm just curious about you and Patrick because, you know,
I'm surprised you're still together.
And she's like, well, what is that supposed to mean? Well, he doesn't love you. And she's like, first of all, that's none of your business. Also, what makes you think I want to be in love? And then she tells him, like, you're like the world's worst friend. Mm-hmm. But then Patrick comes to visit Tashi, and now Art's playing games with Patrick. Like, you know, she's really not looking to settle down.
But Patrick picks up on that.
But Patrick knows his friend. He's like, I see what you're doing, and I'm proud of you because you finally got some bite to you.
Yeah. And I think that is really kind of the ultimate message of the film is these three work together when they're in direct contention with each other, which I think is very human and very interesting. But
it's important to know that when we first meet Patrick in 2019, he's broke and hungry, driving a raggedy-ass Honda CR-V. His credit card's declining at his hotel. He has to sleep in his car. But he doesn't really have to do all that. Because of the three of them, he's the richest one. His parents have money. He's just doing this whole, like, I'm a rich kid who wants to have his own thing, so I pretend to be this broke tennis pro. Mm-hmm. So that's Patrick's story. But he's sort of... he to me was the most authentic of the bunch. Like it seems like he's not really playing a game except that he wants to be a winner and he also wants Tashi.
Art?
Patrick.
Patrick. Well, he's still playing a game, though.
What game do you think he's playing?
He's also dancing away from the fact that, because I think we get a lot of clues that he's probably bisexual. And he's also not able to tell Art how he might really feel about him either. And that is what causes Tashi to be this kind of bizarre conduit between them.
I agree with that in the beginning when they first meet her, but as time went on, I feel like the story's not really reinforcing that. So it just feels like a long, they're reintroduced 13 years later at this match in 2019, and I didn't get a sense that Patrick was longing for Art.
Right, but we're talking about heterosexuals. So I think and this is from a queer filmmaker, but I think that the interesting bookends of these people is in a transitional phase. It's when they first meet, and then in the end, this is a phase of transition, and Tashi is going to have a decision to make potentially.
So I'd seen the trailer a few times, and I was thinking this was going to be an erotic thriller. It's not that. I would say it's like a romantic thriller in a way.
It feels very European because Americans don't really make films with any kind of psychological depth, it seems, lately.
So the first 15 minutes I was a little worried, but then when we get to the hotel room scene and the masturbation story and all that, then I was excited, and then I thought, oh, this is going to be like a toxic throuple. And that's what we're going to be witnessing, and it's not really that either.
It's not, because they're not ever three together like they are in that hotel room scene, which I think is also my favorite scene. And I was nervous at the beginning because there are a couple slightly crunchy bits, like with Josh O'Connor trying to check into that hotel and his card's declined, and there's this older gay couple that sees him. None of the dialogue that was happening with those supporting characters felt right to me.
Yeah, I agree.
But that thankfully goes away, and it was bringing me back because of the Euro feel of it to classic templates of a woman that's stuck between two friends, like in Truffaut's Jules and Jim or Godard's Band of Outsiders, and how Guadagnino uses the score in this, which is fantastic, by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who returned to work with him after Bones and All. He uses the score a lot like Godard does, in this way that's accentuating in sometimes jarring moments, and sometimes on beats that would seem to not make sense, but I think eventually we learn to clue into this is when these people are feeling alive.
Yeah. I think the story, Tashi does tell the two guys when she meets them, like, I'm not a homewrecker. And then ultimately she says, I am a homewrecker because you two aren't friends anymore. So I think it's a slick story and it's inventive, and I was intrigued for most of it. I'm just going to go through my notes. Mm-hmm. I do agree the score is I really enjoyed the score, and I do think that the use of it is interesting because there are moments when it is jarring but clearly deliberate, and I thought very effective.
I loved how it looked. Guadagnino reuniting again with Sayambu Muktipram, who often worked with the Pichapong Weerastical. I mean, there's that scene in the parking lot with the wind. I don't think you liked it as much, but I really liked how that looked and felt. Like, I thought that felt exquisite. And then it stops on a motion with her hand on Josh O'Connor's face. Loved it.
I didn't quite. That felt a little over the top. Like, there's like a hurricane, and then also Zendaya's hair looks great, except for I think in 2019 she has this like wavy bob that's clearly a wig, and it's sitting kind of high, which I don't love. And then she's in the wind, and you can tell that her hairline is like not. I don't know. I was confused. Also, like, sex in a CRV, and then all of it is supposed to be like that's her collateral to get Patrick to throw the game.
It's more than just her collateral, though. But to speak about her hair in 2019, it was giving me Catherine Zeta-Jones as like I'm becoming a maturing woman. But the thing about the weather and the storm in that scene is it also metaphorically signifies the tempest of, I think, what they're feeling internally.
Yeah, obviously. I think that's why I was kind of like, this is very obvious that there's like turmoil.
No, but there's also something kind of it's sexually charged and a little bit romantic too, in ways that I don't know if it had not had those things would have felt the same way.
See, I didn't think it, I thought it was, I felt like it was chaotic. I didn't understand what was the sexual tension and allure between these two, except that
Because
when
they're not
13 years ago, they had a hot and heavy
because
little situation.
it's also about what you're not supposed to be doing too, that I think is the toxic allure that none of them have grown out of.
But none of it felt dangerous to me because we do see that.
It shouldn't be dangerous to us, it's dangerous to them. They're
No,
the ones
but
with something
that's
to
what I'm
lose.
saying. I don't see why, because so in modern day 2019, we see that's the windy scene where they hook up, and that's Zendaya, Tashi trying to convince Patrick to throw the game. But then we find out that 8 years prior or later, I don't know, the time is confusing to me, but in between this 13-year gap, there's a situation in Atlanta where the two of them happen to meet, and it would appear that they hook up, and Art saw them together. He saw them together at a bar sort of holding hands, and then he gets distracted by a fan wanting an autograph. He signs the autograph, and when he turns back, they're gone. And he never questioned her. So that's why I'm saying it doesn't feel dangerous, because he probably already has a hunch that she's doing stuff. She also has a habit of like getting out of bed and going to do stuff. And it's like, there's no way he doesn't know.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying it doesn't feel dangerous. Like he knows his wife is up to something.
But that's what's so good about the finale to me is that we learn that he has a tick early on with how he serves and where he places the tennis ball and that whatever that crevice is on the tennis racket, and they use that to signify that Josh O'Connor had had sex with her earlier, and he does that movement again at an integral moment in the finale that I thought was really well done. I don't know, I loved it. I really liked it.
You should probably better explain that. So when Patrick first goes on the date with Tashi 13 years prior, he doesn't want to tell Art what they did, and Art is begging him because he's in love with Tashi. He's like, please, man, tell me, did you two have sex? And he's like, I'm not going to tell you the details because I know it's going to bother you. And he's like, well, how about this? If you did have sex with her, I want you to serve like I do, like serve the ball. And Patrick says, you know, you have a weird tick where you always put the ball in the center of the racket before you hit it. So then that's what Patrick does. And so Art is clearly bothered. And I agree. That was a very good scene in the final match at the end when he does it. And then Art has like a little meltdown. But I thought it was funny because I thought the ending felt so long. And then at a point, one of them takes really long to serve and they get a time violation, which I thought was funny because I was feeling like my time was being violated. And then the screening that we saw it in, the lights came on before the film ended. So I thought everyone is feeling like this movie's too long. I don't know.
I don't share that sentiment, but to me that was the beat we need for us to understand that he's still really deciding what he wants to do.
Yeah, I mean, it is very effective in that way. I think this movie is very well done for all the reasons you said. I just think that I felt disconnected from, first of all, I don't know tennis very well, which is more my
I don't
problem.
either.
So some of the things like the final game that we watched for like 20 minutes, a lot's happening that I don't think I understood about the scoring. So every time one would lose, I'm like, oh, it's over. Nope, not over yet. So that's my fault. But also, I think for it to be so drawn out, you would think that there's so much on the line. And there is, because she has told this man, I'm going to leave you if you don't win.
But the movie is edging us for that moment.
I didn't feel like that. I felt like up to that point, I didn't get a sense that there was a lot. The only thing I know for sure is that Tashi wants to be a winner, however that happens. Vicariously through her husband, vicariously through Patrick, whatever.
Well, that's why I like about the final moment, because I feel like that is a kind of a win-win for her, and a sense of balance has been restored between the two men.
Yeah, I agree with that, the final moment, but it took us like 20 minutes to get there. So that's what I'm saying, that I think I was fully expecting something very dramatic to happen. Like one of them like kills themselves or something.
No, but I ultimately like that it's just very human and about, you know.
I didn't know that I felt like it was human. These people don't feel like there's a lot of passion. The only passion I felt was that Tashi wants to be a winner because Art is tired of playing the game. He says he's tired, and then Patrick doesn't seem to take it seriously.
But I think that's what feels so human is there are so few things that maybe make us feel that sense of heightened awareness of life. And I think that they all three are drawn to tennis in that way, in how they can participate it, right? Because fate has rendered her kind of flaccid and immobile in the arena that she really loves. And sometimes they're able to feel that same way in the way that they're interacting with each other, but not when it's sedentary, not when when the complacency of life has set in. So that's what I like about it, that we're hinted at, that these people are feeling these things in these moments that you may not be able to have put words to, but you can sense that they're experiencing it. And we're always, all of us, I think, chasing those kind of moments. And unfortunately are almost always pointed back to the past, because we know that path to experience them rather than trying to find something new.
There's a scene in in 2019, Patrick and Art have not really spoken in what would seem like 13 years. But then in this final match, like the day before, Art is in the sauna and Patrick walks in naked. There's also quite a bit of male nudity for anyone who cares. But Patrick walks in naked and is basically trying to like get into Art's head, and is insinuating that Patrick's insinuating that he kind of has something over Art. But then we see Art sort of like actually stand up for himself and say like, you're not even on my level. Like, so this conversation is moot. But Art kind of hints at like he and Tashi still have, or I'm sorry, Patrick insinuates that he and Tashi still have a thing. So I thought that scene worked. I wanted more of that. I feel like I wanted one more scene where the guys maybe had an interaction at some point in between the 13 years. I don't know. I think I really liked their friendship, and that to me is what meant the most of this, like of all the different relationships in the movie. And I feel like that one didn't get, because really the movie's about Tashi manipulating these two to try to get what she wants. And I think Zendaya on screen is very great. I liked all of their performances.
I liked all of them. I thought she was captivating in a way that I hadn't thought of her before. Like certainly this does more for her than Dune Part 2. But really it's figuring out the power plays between them, because I think there's a certain differing level of attraction in whatever combination of them that there are. I think Art is more attracted to Tashi, and I think Patrick's more attracted to Art. And Tashi seems to be whoever is kind of doing what I want them to do, but Patrick is a person that doesn't need her, and Art is. So I don't know. I found that we got enough in the screenplay, which we have to, I think, shout out the screenwriter Justin Kuritzkes, who excitingly also has adapted William S. Burroughs' Queer, his memoir. That's Guadagnino's other film that will be released sometime this year, which now I'm even more highly anticipating. But I don't know. I think that the psychological study of these three was more interesting than I was anticipating, for sure.
We see Patrick on Tinder swiping, like he's clearly made his settings to see men and women. So that's why it would seem like he's probably bisexual or whatever the kids are calling it now. And then we see there's a gay umpire for the 2019 game. I thought that was fun. There's also a moment when
he's very no nonsense.
When Patrick goes on his Tinder, he goes on a Tinder date with this woman. I thought that was a funny scene because he's really only on this date because he needs somewhere to sleep that night. So he's really not into this lady. She can tell, but she seems desperate. And during this date, Patrick sees Tashi, so he's super distracted. He actually ends up like leaving this woman, which, you know, should normally end a date, but she waits there. When he returns,
full of passion.
Yeah, she invites him in, I guess.
I think it's funny that we see her age too on the profile. She's 38.
Yeah. What would you give challengers?
I have to mention that I watched Wimbledon in anticipation of this film. Directed by Richard Loncraine from, I think, was that 04 or 05, starring Kirsten Dunst. And I think maybe if you had also watched that, you would have a greater appreciation for what's going on in Challengers, because I thought that was very basic. And Paul Bettany, that to me hit all the cliched marks. But I would give Challengers 4 out of 5.
I would give Challengers 3.5 out of 5. Anything else?
No.
Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.